What a political season we have had here in Texas so far, and this year is just getting started. Hello, I'm Jack Fink, political reporter here at CBS News Texas. And right now we want to welcome in the people we are going to be talking to about all of this. We have former Railroad Commissioner Michael Williams and TEA Commissioner as well, and former State Representative Democrat from Dallas, Lorraine Birabil. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you all joining us. And so let's start with the big headline that came out this past Tuesday night, which was Speaker Dade Phelan survived what was a bruising and expensive primary battle against David Covey. And he went against not only David Covey, but former President Donald Trump. That's right. And also the Lieutenant Governor and the Attorney General. So what was your reaction that he actually won? Lorraine, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Michael.
Well, you know, we talked about this on election night back in March. I think that I'm not surprised that Dade survived, but let's think about why he survived. I think, first of all, you know, his longtime connections to the community. I think that he's an outlier, frankly. When we look at the rest of what happened on election night, the moderate Republican, the days of the moderate Republican in Texas are pretty much gone. And he survived because of his longevity and his connections in the community. Michael.
You know, it's interesting when you look at this race. It was the most expensive House race we've ever seen in Texas. And Dade won by, the Speaker won by what, 1.4%?
Yeah, 366 votes.
But the interesting thing about it, and I will echo what Lorraine said, his family has long-standing, deep roots in that community, and he served that community for a long period of time. And so he survived simply by being who he is, even though you're right, he had a substantial group of people that were opposed to him. But the roots matter. It matters that you grew up, you went to kindergarten and elementary school with these voters. Your parents worked with some of these voters. Your mom was on the Chamber of Commerce with some of these voters. You've got deep knitted relationships in that community. That's why he survived. And quite frankly, when we looked at what happened across the state, while some others, they may have similar roots, but they weren't as well funded as this one was, as Dade was.
And so now, of course, the next big thing is he going to remain as Speaker in January? And he expressed confidence the other night. I guess what else is he going to say, right? And he basically said he will be Speaker come January. So my question to you, Michael, is that going to be the case?
You know, sometimes you can win the battle, but you can lose the war. And that's my fear of what happens with the Speaker. You know, the Speaker should say that he's going to move towards, you know, getting a cohesive group of folks who will vote for him to be Speaker. That's what he should do. And he doesn't have a Democrat opponent in November, so he can focus all of his attention. But let's keep in mind what he has to run up against. He's going to have Tim Dunn and the Wilkes brothers on the other side. The Attorney General has already said, along with the Lieutenant Governor, to members of the House, if you vote for Speaker Phelan to return as Speaker, you will be next on our list. That is a heavy charge to take if you're a member of the House, but I'll ask a House member. That's a heavy thing to take if you're a House member, to have two billionaires, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas and the Attorney General of the state of Texas, say, you vote for him if you want to, but we'll come after you next.
And Lorraine, you served as a Democrat from Dallas, and so the Democrats are not touched by that, right? That's inner Republican politics. But what do you think is going to happen with all this? Because, you know, the Democrats did support Phelan the last time. Do you think they will this time?
Well, you know, time will tell. I think the first thing that this election really signals is that, one, in order for the Speaker to stay in, I think, one, you know, I don't think it's likely. You know, I agree with you that it's not likely. But two, if he does stay, he's pretty much going to have to sell his soul to the MAGA supporters to hold that position. So I just don't see it as all that likely. But, you know, it's politics. Anything is possible.
It's too late. It's too late for him to endear himself with the MAGA Republicans. He's cut, you know, the swath that he's going to have, and he's got his place. So what he'll have to do is cut a deal with Dems and with some very courageous Republicans who will say, you know, come after me if you want to, I'll survive.
But
And how many are those left?
We'll find out. We'll find out.
But initially, though, the Republicans have to, the House GOP caucus has to decide for itself first before it gets to the wider, right? They've got to decide who's going to be, and they need a majority. So, you know, how's that going to play out? Do you think that given these threats by the lieutenant governor, by the AG, that the Republicans are going to do that? Because, look, we know Tom Oliverson, a doctor who represents the northern Houston area, has already come out and said that he's running for speaker. He's going to go right to the floor if necessary. So what do you make of that? And others may, you know, join in.
I think by the time we get to January, if not before, you're going to have any number of individuals, Republicans, who have decided they want to run for speaker. Every House member looks in the mirror and see themselves and they see a speaker. So they think of themselves, but you're going to have a number of them doing that. And so we'll see what happens as they walk around and make telephone calls and try to see who will support them. They will, at some point in time, and I don't know when that will be, but they will at some point in time coalesce around one or more Republican members. The challenge for the speaker, quite frankly, is how do you help members fend off their fear about these big four, 2 billionaires and 2 of the top 4 office holders in the state? How do you fend that off?
And let's talk a little bit about the fact that the House is going to become more conservative, because at least here in North Texas alone, 8 GOP Republican incumbents lost, whether it be this past week or whether in March. And so now you have 8 new faces there, plus open seat in the 97th House District, plus the House District 2, which is a little further east of us, but still within the North Texas region. So you have 10 new faces coming in. And so I'm wondering, you know, how is this all going to equate to the direction going forward in the House? And then for you, Lorraine, how are Democrats going to try to block? It's going to become more difficult, isn't it?
I do think it's a challenge, but I think history has shown we are certainly up to that challenge, even if that requires all hands on deck, and even if that requires some interesting maneuvering. Well, I wouldn't say that. I'd say all hands on deck for the community and for the people. Okay. But going down that road, you know, I think Democrats are very clear-eyed about the situation that we face in Austin, right? And just more globally, what's going to happen in some of these other races statewide that when we think about coming up in November. And I think that sending this class, this new group that's going to be coming into the House, I think it's more of members being signaled that you can't vote your districts. You can't vote your community. You're going to have to get in the MAGA line and stay in the MAGA line if you want to keep your seat. And what does that mean for governance in Texas? I believe that means that we're going to continue down the road of irresponsible government where people are focusing on book bans instead of making sure that our schools are properly funded.
And what about school choice? Because the governor announced just the other day that he announced actually Tuesday night, just hours after, you know, all the results came out, that school choice is going to pass in the Texas House for the first time ever. It seems like the votes are there.
You said at the top of our conversation that the headline was Phelan wins. To me, the headline is Abbott won, and he won big. He won in March when he got 5 new House members, and he won on the runoff this past Tuesday when he added more. School choice will pass in this upcoming Texas legislative session. It's taken long enough. I mean,
decades.
I gave my first speech in favor of school choice in 1989. I wrote my first commentary in 1990. It's going to take us this long to pass the legislation, but it will pass this time. He's got the votes. He said coming into Tuesday that he only needed a net 2 votes, and he got that plus some. So that's the change. One thing that I would say about something you mentioned earlier in the question you asked Lorraine, as an old school conservative, this body is not going to be not more conservative. This body's going to be more MAGA. I would agree with Lorraine. It's going to be more MAGA. And that means, to echo the comment that you made, that means that they're going to have to learn how to govern. What are the issues that moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas talk about around the kitchen table? You know, what are the real problems that real people have that they need the ledge to solve? That's going to be a real governing challenge for this new body that's coming in Austin.
And, you know, given all that, given what you just said, both of you said about that, are we going to see a very contentious House session in January, do you believe? I mean, really nasty brass buckles, butting heads between Republicans.
I definitely think that's where we're headed. You know, when we look at the results that happen, when we look at the few that remain, right, there is certainly, I think there's no one who's going to have a delusion about this. There is a power struggle among the top figures within the Republican Party in our state. You know, we have an AG and a governor that aren't always aligned, right? We have Patrick, who's not always aligned with the House, right? And Dade, at least as a member, is returning, and he does have a certain following in that chamber. We're going to see how that all plays out. But I definitely think that what we're seeing and what we saw last time in the school choice fight and the voucher fight is that there is not consensus among their caucus. And these elections are going to show, is it everybody getting in the MAGA line, or you're going to vote your districts? And what does that mean in terms of the party platform? What does that mean in terms of governing? And frankly, is that going to divulge us into a place where we are governing irresponsibly, which I believe has already begun? But I think going into this next section, if we're not careful, you know, they might be turning Texas into Handmaid's Tale. And I think there's a lot of people out in the community, fair-minded voters, who are genuinely concerned about that.
Let me do two things and respectfully disagree. I'm not so sure that there would be a more raucous pink building in Austin, because I don't expect the speaker to be reelected as speaker, and I expect the House to be more in line with the state Senate, and I expect the lieutenant governor to be more in line with whoever will become the new speaker, along with the Republicans in the House. And so that kind of fight that we've been having and clashing that we've been having between the eastern side of the building and the western side of the building, I don't expect to see come 2025. And so when we talk about, Lorraine, when we talk about voting their districts, the districts are MAGA. That's how they got there. You know, for an old school traditional conservative, it may be not the place I would want to be, but that's where voters are today, and I recognize that. Our voters in these House districts are more MAGA than they've ever been. And so in a way, in a very real way, these members are indeed representing their districts. They just may be representing their districts in a way other than I might have if I'd ever been a House member.
Well, I've got to jump in there.
Go right in.
Because I think no one can argue that we are always in court, right, in Texas. When we draw our maps, we're always in court. And the reason why is because we have a history of, in this state, of certain voters being marginalized. And there are reasons why some federal laws have been in place to protect communities that look like mine, that I used to represent in the Texas House. And so when we look at the turnout rates, we know that in some elections it's less than 5%. And so I think we're in a place now, and it's not just in Texas, there are other states that are dealing with this, and this has happened all over the country, where even when we look at the federal chamber, it's really only a handful of seats that are up for grabs because these districts have been so gerrymandered to predict a certain result. And so in this case, I would not say that it's the community electing their members, it's the members selecting their communities.
And the last question, and this is really just based on what you said, statewide though, right? The Republicans still, this is where anybody can vote. The Democrats have still not been able to get a Democrat passed, elected in over 3 decades. So if that does ever happen, won't that kind of force change down the way, you think?
Well, I don't think it's a question of if, I think it's a question of when. The reason why all these tactics are popping up, frankly, is because they know that the demographics are not on their side, and time is not on the current Austin majority side, right, in terms of the dome and in terms of statewide. And I think Colin is our Senate candidate, is literally the prototype of the type of Democrat they don't want running, the type of Democrat who is seeking out fair-minded voters in Texas. Fair-minded Texans want someone who is actually going to govern responsibly and work with people across all spectrums to come up with common sense solutions. And I think because of the infighting in the Republican Party, they have positioned themselves where their 5% primary voter is as opposed to where the fair-minded Texas voter is. And so we might very well begin to see that sea change more likely at the statewide level before we see that at some of these local districts because of the way redistricting is done in Texas.
Michael, I'll let you get the last word.
It's interesting. I went to Austin in 1999. I won a statewide race in 2000, one in 2002, and another one in 2008. I've won more statewide races than the Democrat Party has. As you mentioned, as you alluded, Democrats haven't won a statewide race since 1994. I've been hearing about this new onslaught of blue for 30 years now. It hasn't come. It's not coming because Dems sit on the opposite side philosophically from Texans. They disagree with Texans on core issues, even when we go and expand sort of our viewpoint to include some of this MAGA noise. And that's not going to change in this cycle.
Okay. Michael Williams, former TEA and Railroad Commissioner, we appreciate it. Former Dallas State Representative Lorraine Birabil, thank you so much, and thank you.